Welcome to DomiNations. My name is Mark, and today we'll take a second look to our generals. Probably you have seen my older video about the generals, and in basic, nothing has changed about those generals which were covered in this actual video. Unfortunately, the video is more than, I think, 2 years old, and we have got new generals implemented during our last updates. And therefore, I think it's pretty necessary to talk about the new generals, mostly due to the fact that the newly implemented generals are pretty striking. First on some general information. I'm a big friend of honesty, and honestly I have to admit to you that recording the footage for the German version of the video, which is already uploaded, cost me about 6 hours by recording it, collecting it, editing it and uploading it, and that was quite a huge time consuming procedure, and therefore hopefully you won't be mad to me when we are now using the German video footage in the background. Nevertheless, I will do the complete voiceover in English, and all tables and not calculations, but all tables and recommendations should be clearly understandable due to the fact that the names of the generals are clearly readable, and so there is no difference whether to or only a very slight while writing them in German or even in English. Another important fact, just right in the beginning ahead, there is a lot of research we can do for our generals additional to the museum, which makes it pretty intransparent about which guy has which amount of research done for his generals and how strong are the generals in particular. Therefore, I will not focus for exact values to compare the generals which is other. Previously, in front of the video, I took statistics of all generals from my second account, so from an account which is in the medieval age, which has done no research and upgrades and museum stuff at all for the generals, such as a baseline to compare all generals without additional research which could detour the picture. And therefore, during this video, I will show you some charts and rankings of generals, for example, belonging their HP, their range, their speed of movement, and we will focus not for exact values, but for relations between generals, which are, pretty strong in their meaning. Also, there are a lot of generals which are actually TT generals, so troop tactic generals, and today's focus are not the troop tactic generals. That would be definitely too much for one video below 30 minutes, and therefore the troop tactic generals might be a topic of another video, but not today covered. Pretty basic information, nevertheless valuable for new players. What generals do we have? So in number, we have 11 generals. Nevertheless, Björn Ironside is a VIP general, so a general which is only accessible or available for players who have paid money and who needs a lot of crowns if you want to be leveled. So each initial level will cost about 220 up to 250 crowns, and later on, when you need more papers, or how they are called, for leveling him, it will even cost more than 1,000 crowns per level, and so he will consume a lot of crowns actually to being leveled, and therefore he will not be treated in the video, so focusing for the 10 regular generals. First on, if you have built the castle, you will get access to Alexander, which is a pretty moderate, very moderate general with no focus for offense or defense. You will have access to Cleopatra, which is more offensively focused, and Joan of Arc, which is clearly defensively focused, being one of the most durable generals of all. After upgrading the castle to level 2, so Gunpowder Age stage, we will get access to Nobunaga, which is offensively focused, so having more hit points, but therefore more offense, even more offensively than Cleopatra previously. Having upgraded our castle to level 3, so Enlightenment Age, we'll get Napoleon, so our first ranged general. All other generals have only melee range. Later on they will get a range of 3, but we will talk and discuss this topic later on in this video. So far, Napoleon is our first general with range, and he has instantly range 5, which will not change later on. So a lot of range, outranging most other troops, therefore he has some negative aspects about low hit points and low damage per second compared to the others. Upgrading to level 4, which is Industrial Age, you will get access to MacArthur, which is pretty offensively focused, having little hit points but very strong damage per second. Upgrading to level 5, so Global Age, we will get Churchill, which is one of the very most balanced generals, having very, very decent values in offense as well as defense, and being comparable and competitive to nearly all other generals, even for the late game. Castle number 6 and 7, so Atomic and Cold War Age, will not have any new accesses to generals, unfortunately for us. But upgrading to level 8 in the Space Age, we will get access to Shukov. Shukov is the first and onlyest general of all which we have available, which is flying. So later on we will come to these advantages. So far it does not sound a lot, but it is actually a lot. Also, he is one of the very onlyest generals which is able to shoot above walls. So yeah, keep this in mind. We will talk in the comparison later about. Shukov is really offensively focused, having low hit points, but he's flying and having a range of 6. Initially it was 7, now it got deranked to 6. Nevertheless, having the highest range of all generals in the game. After upgrading our castle to stage 9, which is currently the highest stage in the digital age, we also get access to Pedro Herrera, being also a very specific general due to the kind of firing to enemy troops. More about this later on. At least we also have a Hannibal, but Hannibal is not accessible on the ordinary way. So by upgrading the castle, we have to unlock him by finishing his research capstone in the university. Hannibal has so far the best offense as well as defense statistics, and therefore is a very, very recommendable general. We will see later on in the direct comparison to other generals. Let's start with the comparison. For all charts and tables which are represented now, they are trended downwards, so generals which are staying at the very top are best in this aspect. About hit points, we have the most durable or beefy generals such as Hannibal, Jeanne d'Arc, even Churchill and Alexandra. So trended more downwards, we have generals such as MacArthur, Pedro Herrera and at least Shukov. So damage per second, most players intuitively would think that generals with high HP are lower in damage. Funnily, it is not this case, because Hannibal is place 1, so the most beefiest as well as strongest generals of all. Following, we have also Pedro Herrera as a new general available in the digital age, MacArthur, Churchill, Shukov only at place 5 after being deranked recently, Nobunaga, Napoleon, Cleopatra, Alexander, and in the very, very end, like intuitively thought, Jeanne d'Arc with high hit points. In case of range, it's a pretty simple picture. We only have Shukov and Napoleon, then the rest, and funnily, in the very end, this time we have Hannibal. So Shukov has a range of 6, Napoleon a range of 5, then we have all other generals which are initially being based on melee damage, so no range, and after being level 21, which we'll talk about later, they will get a range of 3. Hannibal, nevertheless, no matter how high his level will be in the game, he will stay at melee damage. In case of the ability to shoot or fly above walls, it's also a pretty simple picture. We only have Shukov, which is able to shoot as well as fly above walls, which is a definite advantage. But we also have Pedro Herrera. Pedro Herrera is a machine gun troop, and all other machine gun troops are able to fire above walls. So I'm not 100% sure that she can shoot above walls, but it is my clear assumption. At place 3, we have all of the other generals, even Napoleon with a range of 5, which are not able to shoot above walls, which is a clear disadvantage due to defenders, which could stay behind walls, protected, and they have just first to eat through the walls. Being able to ignore enemy walls, which can have high HP and high levels, is a clear advantage of those generals we have mentioned. Again, simple picture, if we are talking about the speed of movement, there is Pedro Herrera, which is the fastest general in game, moving, like you can see in the video behind, nearly as fast as armored cars, which are the fastest units in the game. She is slightly, very, very slightly slower. I actually don't know why, but she is nearly as speedy as them. All other generals are definitely slower. We only have Shukov, who is able to fly and therefore always takes the direct route, ignoring walls, ignoring gates, ignoring buildings to drive around, which is also faster than the other generals. Nevertheless, in pure movement speed, General Petra Herrera is place 1, Zhukov is place 3, and all the other generals being equally slow are based on place 3 in this comparison. Let's compare our generals about their companions. Yeah, pretty obvious, only Hannibal is able to produce some companions, like an APC troop transporter on regular basis. He is spawning some elephants, fighting for him, and therefore having an advantage about other generals. Let's compare our generals in case of area of impact, so AoE damage. All generals do only single target damage, except for Zhukov and Petra Herrera. Zhukov is doing simple AoE damage by his rocket launcher, but Petra Herrera is using her machine guns to suppress enemies. You can see by the little clock symbol above their heads. So they are getting slowed down as well as having decreased damage.
Let's start with the most striking aspect about leveling generals, and at this point thanks to two pretty active viewers of my videos, because they have mentioned this point and afterwards I have edited it and put it into the video. So it is about the 10 and 5th level gap of leveling generals. So what is the exact meaning of this? I mean, if you are leveling generals, you can level them always once a level. But if you are increasing the gap by reaching a new age, so for example, going from level 20 to 21, from level 30 to 31, 40 to 41, which means you need a new castle to get this level achieved. So your general will access a new age. So for example, getting from level 20 to 21, your general will drive a tank because he is changing from Enlightenment age to Industrial age. The values are also changing in a more big habit, or in a more big manner. So if we are now talking about Hannibal, let's take the level 30 up to 31. Let's compare. We have level 29 to level 30, which means the HP will increase from about 35,952 to 36,892, which means we have a total increase of approximately about 900 hit points from level 29 to level 30. If you are now going from level 30 to 31, which is the big level gap about jumping into the next age, we will get from those 36,892 to 93,178. Which in total is meaning that we are getting approximately a jump of about 2,200 hit points instead of those 900 we got previously. Also, the damage is increasing more rigorously than previously. So the damage from level 29 to level 30, it is about a jump of 626. And if we are getting from level 30 to level 31, it is about a jump of 636, 71. So like you can see, if you are increasing or if you are going from level 30 up to 31, so all 10 level gaps, you will have a huge increase. And if you are going this 5th level, the 5th level increase, so from 35 to 36, 45 to 46, and all ongoing, you will have a slower but nevertheless significantly increase in hit points and all values compared to all other levels you are increasing.
Such initial generals as Cleopatra, Alexander, and Joan of Arc will cost food initially and afterwards, like all other generals, oil to loot. Also, the amount of time which is necessary to level them will increase dramatically from only a few hours up to more than 4 days for the last levels per level. So the amount of resources, like you can see, is tremendously high, as well as the amount of time you have to put in. Connected to this, we have the first tip, which will be re-mentioned and mentioned again afterwards in the tips section, but nevertheless, start and, as if possible, finish your research, which is decreasing the amount of time as well as the amount of resources necessary to level your generals. Otherwise, you will spend days and days and days for each general to get them to the higher levels. There is also a rule of thumb. So if you have your castle, the initial castle level 1 will give you the ability to level your generals up to level 5. And from castle level 2, so from the gunpowder age, each level of castle, so each age, will give you 10 additional levels, which means the level cap for the gunpowder age, which is castle level 2, is 10, for enlightenment age 20, industrial 30, global 40, atomic 50, Cold War 60, space age level 70, and finally, currently in the digital age, level 80. If you have your generals being upgraded to level 21, they will lose their horses and melee range and start driving in tanks, which is coming with a range of 3, so a significant increase in their strategical use. Defensively, we also have some specifications. When or whereby you are able to select your generals for the multiplayer offensively as well as defensively, and in the World War offensively. Defensively, generals are getting placed on the castle automatically in World War, which means they are placed depending on their hit points. So if you don't pay an eye or keep an eye on the level of your generals, it might be that, for example, a beefy and durable general such as Joan of Arc has, due to her level, that much hit points that she will substitute another general on the castle, despite of the fact that you would prefer having other generals in defense in World War II castle. So keep an eye on the hit points of your generals to make sure that those generals which you prefer to have in defense still have a place on the castle to defend your base. Let's talk about related research to our generals. First, the really striking major aspect, which is underestimated a lot of times. The Versailles, as World Wonder, is giving all of your generals plus 10% additional troop health, and your library research in level 8, which is Heritage, will increase this by 1%. So a total of additional 11% HP for generals, which have in the very end definitely above 100,000 HP is quite a lot. But for research in its own meaning, we have first the level 5 research in the library, which is leadership, increasing general health by 10%, gives generals defenders retinue on defense, train a second general using oil, plus 10% general's attack and plus 15% general attack as against other generals. Then also on level 11 we have the command book, which reduces general cooldown by 1 hour, upgrades retinue defenders to Gatling guns, so suppressing companions of the generals, so suppressing fire on enemies, reducing their damage as well as rate of fire. Then chapter 3 reduces general cooldown by 1 hour. 4, train a third general using oil, and 5th, reducing general oil training costs by 10%. Also, a little side tip, which we will remind and also consider later on. If you have 3 generals available for your castle, the first one will be for free, and second and third general will cost you oil for training. The higher the general is, the more oil it will cost, so pretty intuitively and logically, train first the highest level general, second and third, decreasing the generals with lower level to save some oil. Let's come to the research for the university. First in the university we have Suleiman, and within Suleiman we have stage 5, general upgrade costs being reduced by about 10 times 1%. Also we have at Catherine the Great, still level 5 general recovery time being researched 10 times by 2%, so 20% less recovery time by hurt generals. At least we have Hannibal Barcas. We can research 3 books over here. First, Fort general upgrade time being decreased by about 30%, so nearly 1/3. Then we have Fort general upgrade cost, also 10 times 3%, so 30%, and at least Fort general hit points 5 times 6%, again 30%, being able to increase the hit points of all generals. Again, it's quite a lot. Just simply remember that generals will have in the end far above 100,000 HP, and we can get additional 30% by simply researching it, and 11 by our Versailles. Let's talk about the strategical usability of our generals. First, we have the defensive manner. Like I've already mentioned, It is depending on the HP of your generals, whether they are automatically placed in your Worldwar base or whether not. So keep an eye on focusing those generals which are preferred by you to have the highest amount of hit points to being placed automatically as defending generals in your base. And if you want some defending generals, I can definitely recommend to you Hannibal, who is having the highest hit points as well as damage per second and producing some companions. We have Shukov with really high damage, ability to shoot and fly above walls, having the highest range, area of impact damage. Then we have Petra Herrera, also area of impact damage. She is suppressing enemies, the fastest unit in the game. And at least Churchill. So if you're having your 3 generals in the castle and probably the Pentagon with the 4th general, this is a very, very good team in my opinion. Hannibal, Shukov, Petra and Churchill. So talking about the offensive manner of generals, I differentiated between 3 ways of sensible use. The first one would be to distract the silo. It's more about a passive role at the very side or edge of the map, having a lot of HP but not being fast or having a lot of DPS to get faster to the enemy defense buildings and probably getting hurt. If you use your generals to distract the missile silo, make sure that the generals are on the map and not in the forest, otherwise the silo will not target them. Therefore, I can definitely recommend to you Hannibal with a lot of HP, Joan of Arc and Churchill. Offensive manner, tearing enemy spawn out of the base is only slightly different to the first one. Over here they are not completely passive, they are active due to the fact that a lot of defenders, also town center defenders, other generals and probably donated troops from the stronghold will come out, and we definitely need more than only HP. We also need strong generals probably suppressing, and therefore I can recommend pretty obvious Hannibal, Shukov and Petra. Petra in very, very especially due to the fact that she is able to suppress enemies. Optionally, you could also use Churchill or probably Joan of Arc. So the third offensive manner, simply supporting your main troops, is about just dropping them with your main troops and let them do their work. Over here, I think it's pretty important to consider which role you intended them to do. So for example, only an example, if you are attacking with conventionally barrack troops, and those troops are pretty endangered by enemy mortars, and you thought about, okay, let's take a general with me to distract enemy mortars from my main troop. It's pretty unsenseful to have someone like Napoleon or Shukov with you, because they have equal, if not even more range than your main troops, and the main troops will run in front of the general, so the general cannot distract them from mortars. Even more, the main troops are now defending your general, so the roles are completely changed. Therefore, the range is pretty important if you send generals with an intention to support your main troops. If you have generals which have low range than your main troops, they will be earlier than the main troops, close to defending buildings and getting shot, so they can protect your main troops. If they have higher range than your main troops, then they will stay behind, getting protected by the main troops and being able to shoot above your main troops on enemy buildings. Both can be really sensible, but you have to consider and think about which is fitting for your own strategy of attacking. Over here I can definitely recommend you Hannibal, Shukov, Petra and Churchill, but depending on with which troops you are attacking, probably also Napoleon or MacArthur. After having seen and heard that many comparisons as well as recommendations, each one of you should have noticed that Hannibal, Shukov, Churchill and Petra are in the top 3 most of the time, and therefore most obviously those generals are the very strongest and most sensible to play out of all ones. Let's come to the last section of the video. So we are hearing some tips. Those ones of you who have watched the entire video previously will hear some tips which are now doubling. First, it's about the level of the generals. So if you are activating your generals, think smartly about and activate those generals first with the highest level. Second and third activated generals will cost you oil, and if you activate the lowest levels first, it will cost you more oil, so being more expensive. Second aspect, level your generals wisely, and I do not mean level each of your general to level 10 only to have them equally. I mean offensively, meaning you can only use 3, defensively 4 generals. So if you have 10 generals leveled, 6 of them always are obsolete. So first focus on the best 3, probably 4 generals which are fitting your personal preferences and attack strategies and level those ones. Sideways, you can use other generals, also smart, which are useless and senseless for you. Just send them on expeditions and let them get some extra rewards for you, so that they are not completely useless as zombies on your castle.
About automatically order in which generals are getting placed on your Worldwar castle defensively. This order is depending on the general's DPS, so damage per second. So even if you have researched 2 generals probably to the same level, and you are planning to have, let's say, Joan of Arc as one of your generals on your castle defensively, because she is defensively pretty sensible, she has a lot of HP, you have to consider that her damage per second are significantly lower than those of other generals. So for example, having Joan of Arc as well as Shukov as a really offense and strong general, both on level 29, you will have to increase Joan of Arc a few levels so that her damage per second are higher than those of another general to get her on your castle defensively in Worldwar. So there are only 3 spaces on your castle to have defensively generals activated. Therefore, you have to consider, okay, over here we have probably my first general with the highest amount of damage per second, so he will definitely be on the castle. Over here we have the second general with the second highest damage per second currently, second place on the castle. And now if you want another general definitely to have on your castle, you have to make sure that this third general is also, in case of all of your generals, that one with the third highest damage per second. Otherwise you have to research him or her despite of the level and any other information.
If generals being hurt, this no matter whether offense or defensively, meaning in Worldwar, in multiplayer, they have to regenerate and are not being available for you. You have to buy them back with some crowns. So if the Worldwar, it is probably an important Worldwar you are fighting in, and there are only a few hours for you to take your first or even both Worldwar attacks, probably make sure to not have your best valuable generals on your castle in multiplayer. Otherwise it could be that someone attacks you, your generals are getting hurt, and then they are not available for the Worldwar attack. At least also a pretty basic tip, nevertheless valuable for new players. If you are destroying the castle while it's sabotaged or blitzkrieged, like in the former times, it is not the case that all generals are dead and disappearing, but if you are destroying the castle, all generals which are on the castle will spawn with only 70% instead of 100 of their HP. Nevertheless, they will spawn, so don't be surprised if you are facing enemy generals and you intended to knock them out with some sabotage and then killing the castle and not having to deal with them. So that's it about the general update. Some informations were already in my former videos, some ones are new. If you have some additional or further information which are pretty important to you, just let me know down in the comment section. We'll see you soon. Your domination tips.